today's Democratic Party should probably be two parties, and most people know what I'm talking about. Today's Republican Party should probably be two parties, and people also know what I'm talking about. And then you can imagine maybe one party in the middle, and then one party on one extreme or the other, and voila, that gets you to six, and that would be much more representative because it turns out now 51% of Americans say they're independents. Most people do not love what's going on in either of these parties. From Europe, they come up to me sometimes. They say, "Hey, Andrew, love what you're doing because in my country, a new political party comes up every cycle. It like rises and falls and it merges in with something another thing." And then he said, "I have no idea what the American political system's doing with with its like two perma
Yeah.
parties." And then you're not sure,
Well,
like, you know.
so Andrew, one of the interesting things is we had two perma parties. So if you go back to the from the Second World War, actually really from the end of the First World War, right the way through to the 1970s, the two main parties, Conservative and Labour, were getting well over 90% of the vote. And frequently, these smaller parties were barely getting a seat. So what's interesting is we used to think that was a necessary condition of the first past the post system. And what we've learned is it isn't. Strangely, it is possible. It was possible first for the Lib Dems, which is this kind of center ground party, to emerge and take key constituencies, often by running very, very smart local campaigns. But they've now ended up with about 79 seats in Parliament, so they're not very far behind the Conservatives, who are in the 120 region. And they've done it by, effectively, it would be like somebody running and they're often running in rural areas, like somebody running in Wyoming, really getting into the details of what people in Wyoming wanted, and doing that in enough states to put together a really impressive group in Parliament. Now, I still think we should go further. I still think I'd like to look at places like New Zealand, which have a combination between a first past the post system and a proportional system, and they genuinely did manage to do what you're talking about. They broke the right into two parties and the left into two parties, and it's been very healthy because it's meant that the crazies on the right, kind of crazy populists, floated off, and a more center ground right was able to survive, and the same happened on the left. Much, much healthier for their politics. So I'd like to change the UK system too. The other thing, though, we don't talk about, Andrew, haven't talked about yet, which is obvious and maybe not even worth wasting listeners' time on, is money. I mean, in the UK system, it's like a joke. I mean, we like you make jokes about the fact our policemen carry truncheons instead of guns. I mean, when I was running to be a member of Parliament in my constituency, I was limited to spending £23,000, so $28,000 in the entire campaign.
You mean
And
23 million, right?
exactly. And my opponent is literally counting every T-shirt that I've bought, because if he can catch me having bought one T-shirt more than $28,000, I'm disqualified. So it's a very, very good way of doing it. You don't have to limit the donations.
You mean you don't love the 1 billion over here and the 2 billion over there? You don't think that is infinitely wise and
Well,
expresses the will? Free speech, Rory.
free speech. That's what it's all about. Free speech. And then I guess there's the social media question. I mean, we've had this very interesting debate, which you'll be in the heart of, which is Elon Musk has got very interested suddenly in British politics for no reason that anyone can work out. So he suddenly will share some article claiming that the British Prime Minister is going to deport rioters to the South Atlantic, and will get sort of 43 million likes. And because the algorithm, almost everybody in the UK on X will see these things. And then we had these riots in which literally people using social media claimed that three young girls had been stabbed, and they claimed it was a Muslim immigrant who'd come over from Syria on a boat in the last year. And it turned out that the girls had been killed by a British Christian who'd been born in the United Kingdom. But the result of this was people went and burnt down mosques,
terrible,
tried to set fire to hostels which they thought had Muslims in them, etc. So I think the other thing that's certainly been very much part of our lives is we've seen the positive insurgent bits of social media, and you and I, Andrew, benefited from that in our campaigns. But we've also seen, with the rise of populism on the far right, how characters like Donald Trump, and I'd argue Boris Johnson, who I don't think would have been able to become leaders in a pre-social media age, were suddenly able to achieve incredible prominence and reach.
So you're saying that money and social media aren't just a more is better, good. And you guys also have another fascinating dimension in the UK, I think, which is constrained duration of these campaigns, right? Like, isn't there just like a particular set
That's
number of days and weeks? How
You
long
can
do you
only
guys get to run?
You get to run for 6 weeks, yeah.
6 weeks.
Whereas you guys your presidential campaigns run for about 4 years, as far as I can see.
Oh yeah, man! It's like the perma campaign, which also leads to phenomenal policy. So because I can't do anything while I'm running. Oh wait, I'm always running. So let's rewind to something you said that was incredibly important to the Americans here, which is you guys had the two perma parties, got 95% of the vote, let's say, for years and years and years, and everyone was like, oh yeah, that's the way it has to be. But then a third party emerged and started winning in uncontested zones, which, by the way, also resembles about 70% of the United States. Like 70% of American races are not meaningfully contested. And so they started winning hearts and minds by focusing on local issues and getting local reps elected and then building a constituency. And then the constituency eventually grows to a point where they started winning seats.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. They often started essentially in what would be the equivalent of your state legislatures. So they would have started with very, very hardworking, often idealistic people on relatively low salaries, taking small geographical wards, and by building up control of the equivalent of your state legislatures, would then begin to get elected the equivalents of Congress people.
That is amazing. That's kind of what we're doing at Forward. I don't know if you realize that you're talking to the co-chair of the third biggest party in the country by resources.
I do, Andrew. I do, and
I'm
very proud.
Lot. But that is the inspiration, is that if we march around and start putting people into elected office at local levels, and we do have, at this point now, a host of candidates running at local levels around the country. And this is one of the fascinating things I try and explain to people, Rory, is like, they're like, oh, America, two-party system, there cannot be a third party. And I was like, wait a minute, there are 515,000 local races around the country. 70% of them are uncontested or uncompetitive. And tens of thousands of them are even technically nonpartisan. Mayors, county executive, school board, city council, a lot of those seats are nonpartisan. So you could have thousands of people just raise their hand tomorrow and be like, hey, turns out I'm this new thing. It would have zero impact on, like any laws. Like you just do it.
Yeah.
We've already had dozens of people do that, including Mayor of Fort Collins, Colorado, the mayor of Newtown, Florida.
So interestingly, Andrew, what we've found in the latest election is, so the first people to do this were the Lib Dems, which was the Centre Party. Now there's been a move from a party on the right, but there's also been significant success for the Green Party, which also came from nowhere. They had historically 0 MPs. Then they had 1 member of parliament elected with me in 2010. And now they've come out of this election having got a significant chunk of the vote. And they've got real momentum and they can really build. Because, and I imagine the biggest barrier that you face is campaign financing.
It's not, a little something called money, Rory. That's right. Yeah.
It's not actually your constitution. There's nothing in the constitution that stops somebody doing it.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe and hit that bell if you want to be notified every time a new episode drops. Thank you.